crankbait consists of 2 treble hooks, a hollow plastic body, and a bill that makes it dive to a certain depth. Sometimes the bill is long, sometimes it's short, and sometimes the bill doesn't even exist.
What?
But no matter what they look like or how deep they dive, crankbaits have been catching game fish of all species for generations. And so in today's video, I want to break down the crankbait category in Masterclass format so that you can feel more confident whether you fish from the bank, the kayak, or the bass boat to go out there and crank up some fish. My name's Tyler, and let's talk about it. Another giant, another giant. Look at that, y'all. I can't believe what I just caught. Yes! So because this video is going to be a total masterclass on fishing crankbaits for bass, I want to separate my tips into 4 main sections. Number 1 being the components of a crankbait. What is this thing and what gear is necessary or just helpful to better efficiently throw a crankbait for bass? So that's section 1. Section 2 is going to be the retrieval. How do you best fish a crankbait of various types in your pond or lake? Section 3, the location. Where should you be throwing a crankbait to have an effective time catching fish out on the water? In section 4, all the tips that couldn't fit in the first 3. But you know, early on in my fishing journey, I lived on a lake, Lake Travis in Central Texas, where a crankbait was really effective. I just didn't throw it that much, but the coolest guys I knew did. And honestly, I was kind of jealous. My good fishing buddies, Clark and Zach, were constantly catching big fish on crankbaits in my boat in front of me, and there was nothing I could do about it. Now, a decade later, I've definitely caught up with them in terms of crankbait knowledge and success, but the one place in which they were still cooler than me was that they wore the coolest cowboy boots. So to catch up with them finally, I thought today's video would be brought to you by Tecovas. And I recently had the chance to go visit a Tecovas store near where I live, and let me tell you, the experience was amazing. They had everything from men's and women's country apparel to accessories and of course, cowboy hats, but a pair of new boots is exactly what I was after, and I found the ones I wanted. After a few complimentary sparkling waters for Hannah and I, the Jack is the boot that I decided on because this thing goes really well with thinner leg pants, because I don't know if you've seen or not, but I've got twig legs. So big, tall cowboy boots just don't fit my style. These do, and I'm pumped to have them. With Tecovas, you can expect quality in every single pair with a 200-step handmade process that goes into every single boot. And I can attest that just wearing these in the store, there is no break-in process needed. These things are comfortable out of the box. So if you want to check out their awesome line of men's and women's super nice cowboy boots all the way down to leather hardcore work boots, I will leave them linked down in the video description, or you can scan the QR code that's been up here on the side of the screen. Huge thanks to Tecovas for sponsoring this channel. I am pumped to have them belong for the ride, and like I said, the link is down there in the video description. But now that we've talked about being a cool guy, let's talk about being a cool angler by learning to throw crankbaits. All right, so category number 1 of crankbaits is the type, the build, and the gear needed. Now I put needed in air quotes because truly in fishing, there's hardly ever a time that a gear or the rod, reel, and line is 100% necessary to catch a bass, but I'm not gonna sit here and lie and say that every single rod, reel, and line combination will yield the same exact action and the same results with every single crankbait, because that's not true. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's talk about first the build of a crankbait. Now in the intro, I covered the majority of the build. That is the hard plastic body, the bill that makes it dive or the lack thereof, and the 2 treble hooks. Can there be 1 treble hook? Yes, I've seen it. Can there be no treble hooks, but instead just 2 singular hooks? Yes, I've also seen that. But for the majority of crankbaits, this is what they look like. And the main difference in all crankbaits is how that hard plastic body is built. Is it round? Is it skinny? Is it long? Is it short? Does it float really slow or does it float fast? Does it have rattles or is it silent? All of those questions can be answered by what is the hard plastic body made of, and I guess what's also inside of it. So for the most part, crankbaits take on, I would call it like a minnow / shad presentation. So it is kind of a bulbous, longer than it is tall for sure, type of circular shad-shaped thing. The Strike King 2.5 crankbait, I think, being a good representation of the average crankbait build. Just kind of a bulbous looking shad thing. And because it has no rattles inside, it is silent. Unlike its larger cousin, the 4.0 square bill that has just a little bit of rattles in there, you can barely hear them. And these 2 lipless crankbaits here, the Strike King Red Eye Shad, this one has the 1 knocker bead, and this one lots of beads. Now, just by looking at a crankbait, you can't tell what it's gonna sound like, what the internals are, but you can tell what the action is going to be, at least how wide or skinny it wobbles in the water. A square bill crankbait, because the top is relatively wide across, is going to have a very wide tail kick on the back as it wobbles through the water. A lipless crankbait though, zoom in on this one, is not very wide at all, and therefore, when it is retrieved in the water, it is very, very skinny. And it's not just the build shape in the lipless versus the lipped crankbaits that cause it to have a different action. You can have two very similar looking crankbaits, this one being the 1.5 square bill, and this one being, sticks my finger, the Chick Magnet having a flat side and therefore a very skinny wobble, and the 1.5 having a wider back and therefore a wider wobble. Now Tyler, in looking at all of these crankbaits, how should I know which one to choose for certain times of the year, for certain locations, for certain depth zones? We're gonna discuss all of that, but for the most part, flatter sided crankbaits, so your flat sides and your lipless are better in cold water, and as the water gets warmer, you can really experiment with a wider wobble. To a certain extent though, in like the spring, summer, fall, any style of crankbait can work. Now most crankbait manufacturers make their crankbaits have certain names that kind of give you a clue as to how deep it's going to dive. So I'm sponsored by Strike King. I use all Strike King crankbaits, and they number their crankbaits as in the lower numbers dive shallower and the larger numbers dive deeper, and also corresponds with how large the actual crankbait is. So this here is the 1.0 square bill, 1 being a very small number. It dives 1.5 to 3 foot, and it's a very, very small size profile. This here is the 4.0 square bill. It dives to about 6 to 7 feet and is a larger profile. You can see the difference between the two sizes right here. And in between the 1.0 and the 4.0, you've got the 1.5 and the 2.5. And as far as longer build crankbaits, you've got the XD line of crankbaits, the 3XD, the 5XD, the 6XD, the 8XD, and the king daddy of them all, the 10XD. Now, while Strike King uses a numbered system from basically 1 to 10, I think Rapala and at least Bill Lewis that I can think of use a number that actually corresponds to how deep it dives. So Rapala is known for the DT series. You've got the DT4, the DT6, the DT12. Can you make a guess as to how deep those dive? That's right, 4, 6, and 12 feet respectively. Now coming back to the build style of a crankbait, what makes this unique, I would say you've got two negatives that are just totally baked into the cake with a crankbait, but also two corresponding positives. So the two negatives of a crankbait are, one, the crankbait has an immovable predetermined depth it dives in the water column, and it's an incredibly snaggy lure.
Ouch, 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 ouch.
This crankbait is a Strike King gravel dog. It has an 8 on the bill. That means it dives to 8 feet deep, and it only dives to 8 feet deep. Now, if I guess I reel it slower, it could dive shallower, but no amount of speeding up my retrieve can get this thing to dive any deeper than 8 feet. Maybe like 2-pound test line on a super, super long cast, it could get to 10. But for the most part, a crankbait that has a bill has an immovable predetermined depth. So if you want to reach 12 foot deep, this is probably not the crankbait for you. And if you want to fish in 1.5 feet of water on some shallow rock, this is also probably not the crankbait for you. It just dives too deep. And I feel like it's just a given, but this thing is snaggable. Having 2 treble hooks with, 6 hooks on there, it is not very easy to fish around grass, around wood, around really a lot of things that are on the bottom. Now, of course, when fishing a crankbait around totally open water, it is not snaggable at all. And we're gonna talk about open water versus cover and structure here in a little bit, but for the most part, immovable depth zone and snaggable. But the snaggable is also somehow a positive in that it's a pretty sticky lure. Just by moving my fingers down the treble hook here, it kind of sticks my finger every single time. And if it does that to my finger, it's doing it to a bass when it slaps at it. And so crankbaits as a category definitely hook fish outside the mouth a lot more than other lures do. And I'm not saying it's snagging them, but you definitely have the opportunity to land more fish that bite a crankbait in unconventional ways. They don't have to actually totally engulf it for you to hook and land that fish. And the other built-in positive with crankbait fishing is that because it is meant to be retrieved relatively fast in the water column, it is a reactionary lure. So it takes fish that were lethargic or not quite interested, and it makes them strike it out of pure reaction. Fish that eat a crankbait, I don't know the numbers, don't know the science, but I would wager that the vast majority of them are eating it not because they've hunted it down and taken a gander at it and said, this looks delicious, I'm gonna eat it. It goes by their face and they say, I've gotta check out what that is. And for a bass, they can't use their hands to feel it like we can, they have to use their mouth. So positives, they are reactionary and they are sticky. Now, speaking of sticky hooks, you've got 2 main styles of treble hooks that come on all crankbaits. You've got wide gap and you've got round bend. And you know, I could sit here for 5 minutes discussing the good things, the bad things about each one of these treble hooks, but the main thing you need to know is that wide gap hooks hook less fish, but have a better hookup ratio, and round bend hook a whole lot more fish, but have a worse hookup ratio. So if your fish are lethargic, they're kind of slapping at the bait and not really eating it, I would go with the round bend. That's why most crankbaits straight out of the box come with round bend. But if your fish are really attacking it and you want to make sure you hook every single fish that bites, go with the wide gap. And the best type of crankbait treble hook, in my opinion, is one that has a smooth coating on it. There's tons of different brands out there. My favorite are the VMC Redline treble hooks. And on almost all of my finesse crankbaits, especially in the wintertime, I will switch the stock hooks out for those. But is it necessary for you? No, it's not. And the last thing about selecting the right crankbait is having a good understanding, matter of fact, I wouldn't say good, a better than working understanding of the depth you are making casts over in your pond or your lake. That way you can select the one that dives to the right depth, or a lipless crankbait that sinks in the water column that is variable. You can fish shallow or deep, and in that scenario, the weight of your lipless is a whole lot more important than, of course, the bill size. Now, as far as the rod, reel, and line selection when it comes to fishing a crankbait, honestly, you can get by with whatever combo you've got as long as it's over 6 foot in length and at least medium or medium heavy power. Anything in like the medium light or the ultra light category, you're really gonna have trouble casting heavier crankbaits. So anything above like the 1.0 square bill size, or like the tiny finesse shallow diving crankbaits. And then on the opposite side of the spectrum, of course, you have the medium heavy extra fast rods, and then the heavy and extra heavy, and those, they can cast a big crankbait like this one here, the 6XD, just fine, but casting anything smaller than like the 4.0 square bill is really tough. So I think the medium or the medium heavy are the two best powers to stick with when it comes to fishing a crankbait. So if you've got a 7-foot medium heavy bait caster or a 7-foot medium spinning rod, that's great. If you are looking to purchase though a crankbait dedicated combo, or you know what, I say you can throw a square bill, 3-2-1. If you are looking to purchase though a reaction bait combo, so not just crankbaits but vibrating jigs and spinner baits and jerk baits, I would say you go with a medium moderate, a medium moderate fast, or a medium heavy moderate. All of those combinations of actions and powers on the rod, I think, give you a good mixture of casting distance, of loading the bait up as you make a long cast, but also not having too stiff of a rod that you can rip the hooks out of their mouth. We'll discuss hook set and retrieval here in a little bit. Having the right rod is critical to actually hooking up with the fish. Now, the reel matters a whole lot more than the rod does, in my opinion, and the gear ratio really matters. So can you throw a crankbait on a 9.5 to 1 gear ratio? Yes, you can, but it's gonna go really fast, and it's tougher to slow down a fast gear ratio than it is to speed up a slow one. So for most crankbaits, even shallow diving ones that I'm mostly retrieving pretty fast, 7.5 to 1 is the fastest gear ratio I'll get, but I love ones in the high 5s to low 6s. This one here being the BB1 Pro, my favorite crankbait reel, and I believe what's the gear ratio? 6.2 to 1. And for line, I love throwing almost all of my crankbaits on 12-pound resin line, whether it's monofilament or fluorocarbon, this here being 12-pound. I think this is R18, which is a very expensive fluorocarbon, but you can definitely get by with whatever brand you want to use. Seaguar Basics fluorocarbon I have on all of my pond combos, and I catch plenty of fish with it. I will leave a link down in the video description. But if I'm fishing, say, a lipless crankbait around grass, or especially a square bill or a hybrid hunter in just shallower water, I'll go up to 15-pound, 17-pound, sometimes even 20-pound line. Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh, I watched him eat at the stinking boat. But I think most crankbaits are built in the factory and tested on, I believe it's 10 or 12 pound fluorocarbon, and so you're not gonna get the depth the package says it dives to if you go heavier than 12-pound line, in my opinion. Now, can you throw a crankbait on braided line? Absolutely, but it has no stretch at all, so you're gonna get the shallowest diving depth it can possibly go. I think the biggest thing with braided line that holds it back is that it has zero stretch, and so when a fish attacks your crankbait but doesn't actually eat it that good, and you have no stretch in your line, and you set the hook maybe way too hard, you can easily tear the hook out of that fish's mouth or out of the outside of its face. And I think the stretch you have on a monofilament or a fluorocarbon, aka a resin type of line, actually helps keep fish hooked on a crankbait that braided line wouldn't do. Now, the good thing about retrieving a crankbait is that it's very simple. You crank the handle. But a totally straight, consistent retrieve is not always the best for every situation, and so here's my breakdown of both build and lipless crankbait retrieves. For your standard build crankbaits, I make a long cast over whatever area I'm targeting. It could be the side of riprap rock, could be like I have here, an open grass flat, and right when it hits the water, I'm going to make 5 to 10 really quick turns at the handle. That gets the bait as quickly as possible down to its maximum diving depth, and then from there, I go on with my retrieve, and there's 3 main styles. First, like I mentioned, it could be just a straight retrieve back to you at a slow, a medium, or a fast speed. It could be a stop and go retrieve, which gives lethargic fish the chance to see the bait as it pauses and then oftentimes triggers them into striking when the bait continues moving again. So stop and go, very effective. Or you can also do what I call the feel and reel, where you make a long cast, get it down to its maximum depth, and then almost drag it like a Carolina rig, or you're dragging a Texas rig across the bottom. And what that allows you to do is focus your entire attention on your rod, feeling exactly what's down there on the bottom. And the feel and reel works really well, especially around hard bottom like rock, sand, and gravel. The downside though to the feel and reel retrieve is that you may end up getting your bite at the end of your drag, which allows you almost no space to set the hook. Does that matter though? We're going to talk about crankbait hook set here in a second. So again, straight retrieve, stop and go, and feel and reel. Now for the non-billed or lipless crankbaits, those 3 retrieves can work, but because this is a sinking bait, not a floating bait, it'll act a little bit differently. On a straight retrieve, the slower you turn your handle, the lower that lipless crankbait will sit in the water column, and vice versa. The faster you reel, the higher the bait will rise. And on a stop and go retrieve, while a billed crankbait will float on the stop, a lipless crankbait will sink. Because it sinks, you can use an interesting retrieve called the yo-yo, where you cast it out there, let it sink down to the bottom, and then work it identically to how you would a Texas rig. So I know I said the feel and reel is similar to a Carolina rig. This is really like you're hopping a jig 2 foot off the bottom, letting it sink back down. Reel in your slack, bring it up, let it sink back down. And on the rise, the bait will vibrate and then it'll kind of flutter back down, and then vibrate up and then flutter back down. Now, do not use the yo-yo retrieve if your body of water, your pond, your lake has a whole bunch of stuff to get snagged down there on the bottom. You know, big nasty boulders, of course, lay down trees and logs. But if you've got healthy aquatic vegetation in your body of water that can easily clear with the snap of your rod tip, the yo-yo retrieve can catch you some giants on a lipless crankbait. Well, my goodness, folks, what an episode it's been so far. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Go ahead and check if you're subscribed to this channel, because most of my viewers are not actually subscribed here on TRF. I would love to have you guys along for the bass fishing learning journey. Now, let's hop back to the bank to discuss crankbait location. And the reason why I'm standing on the bank for this section and not from the boat is because for you guys who are stuck on shore, a crankbait can still work very well for, with a few restrictions. If the place that you bank fish from has a lot of lay down trees and just overall snaggy stuff in the water, you run the real risk when fishing a crankbait of losing it really, really quickly. And so in those scenarios, I would recommend throwing something more weedless like a spinnerbait or a weedless swim bait. And if you've got water that's filled with all kinds of nasty snot grass like you see here, crankbaits catch that so fast. Now, you may never actually lose a crankbait to snot grass, but it's gonna foul up your bait almost every single cast, affect your crankbait's action, look a whole lot less natural, and result in less bites. But if your pond has a healthy amount of aquatic vegetation, and I would say 2 to 10 feet of water, you can throw a crankbait just fine. My favorite being a lipless crankbait, but I've caught plenty of big fish, if y'all have watched the channel, on the hybrid hunter. The one constant though for bank anglers is that a crankbait is usually most effective during the colder months, so fall, winter, and early spring, when any grass, I don't care if it's snot grass or healthy aquatic grass, hasn't had a chance to grow up yet. You have a lot more places to throw a crankbait from the bank in the colder months. Now, if you're a bass boat, a john boat, a kayak fisherman, all of those crankbait restrictions can still apply to you, but if you do get your crankbait snagged, you can just go get it unsnagged. This allows for considerably more risky casts that can be made from the boat as opposed to bank fishermen, and it also broadens the type of crankbaits you can throw, and especially how deep of a crankbait you can throw. And if you want to learn more about location with a deep diving crankbait, I'm not going to discuss it in this video, but I made an entire video all about that. I will leave it linked down in the video description. Now, one final thing I'll say about fishing crankbaits, especially when it comes to location, is that you don't have to actually have it located on the bottom, aka touching the bottom. It can be a mid water depth lure. Now, most of the time I want it hitting the bottom, and 100% of the time I want it somewhere near the bottom. If it's 50 feet deep and the fish are sitting in 15 feet, I'm probably not throwing a crankbait. I'm gonna throw a swim bait or a jerk bait or shaking a minnow. But for the most part, because of live scope, crankbaits have just declined in popularity. And so I think if you fish a crankbait relatively close to the grass, to the wood, to the rocks, but not actually hitting it on the bottom, that can trigger a fish that maybe has seen every other style of lure, but just hasn't seen a crankbait that often. And so I think in your crankbait journey, don't be afraid to fish it in the column, but also on the flip side, don't be afraid to let that bill dredge the bottom, because that can trigger a fish into strike. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I think it's a big one. Yes, sir. Big one. Big one. Big one. Big one. Ooh, got him. Oh, look at that guy right there. 3-pounder. Now, as far as the hook set goes for a crankbait, it is probably the lightest out of all the hook sets in not just bass fishing, but fishing in general. And that is, you are reeling your bait, you feel the bite and you just strongly and smoothly sweep and start reeling a little bit faster. This hook set, and this hook set were all good crankbait hook sets. Now, do I like to give them the business a little more than most? Yes, and so I throw a more moderate taper or a more medium power rod as opposed to medium heavy or heavy. And so if you want to throw a heavy power rod with a crankbait, you can. You just can't set the hook nearly as hard. And if you find yourself losing a few fish when you're fighting a crankbait, they just jump and they throw the crankbait out of their mouths. That's just kind of part of the game. It comes with the territory. This bait, being a moving bait in the water column, oftentimes doesn't even get fish hooked in the mouth at all. And if it does, they've got one, maybe two hooks. And this thing, especially being a medium or deep diver, they've got so much leverage to throw the bait out of their mouth. And so as long as you get a good hook set, keep up the tension and don't let a fish just jump boat side or by the bank. Land that fish as quickly as possible. Those are a few of my best practices when it comes to setting the hook, fighting, and landing a crankbait bass. Oh, that was a 5-6. So that has been a crankbait fishing masterclass. And like I said in the intro, it's been catching game fish of all species, not just bass. Now, I'm a primarily bass fisherman, but it can catch walleye, it can catch pike, it can catch perch, it can catch bluegills. There are so many different styles and types of crankbaits, and I hope this video taught you a little bit about how to fish them and maybe gave you some confidence. Now, two crankbaits I feel like I didn't go into super detail on, but definitely need it and have their own videos are the Strike King Hybrid Hunter. I will leave that masterclass clickable up here in this corner, and the deep diving crankbait, a category that's not applicable to every style of angler, but if you fish in a kayak or a boat or have deeper bank access, learning how to fish this style of crankbait is definitely necessary, and having bigger gear, bigger line, bigger rods is beneficial. I talk about all that up here in the corner. As always, you guys know my tackle is linked down in the video description. My name's Tyler. It's been a pleasure, and we'll see y'all next time right here on TRF.